Joining us now to discuss more is Senior Fellow at Atlantic Council, Ariel Cohen. Ariel, thank you so much for joining us. What do you think we can
It's
expect to
always
be
a
top of
pleasure.
mind for? Yes, thank you so much. What do you think we can expect to be top of mind for a lot of leaders at the Assembly this week?
The big question mark after the events of last week's is, can America lead? And unfortunately, it breaks my heart to say there are a lot of uncertainties after our botched withdrawal from Afghanistan and the mishandling of the US, UK, Australia, or they call it AUS UK, whatever, Asuka, the deal to supply nuclear submarines to Australia, which derailed our longest alliance with France. I'm not saying we shouldn't have done the deal, we should have. I'm not saying we shouldn't have pulled out of Afghanistan, but we should not have abandoned all the American citizens and Afghan collaborators. So there are big question marks about American leadership. And on top of that, the gigantic, the enormous $3.5 trillion package that the Democrats are trying to push through Congress and having dissents in their own ranks raises question about our own economic viability, which is absolutely key for American leadership in the world.
Yeah, so timing and execution not necessarily in the president's favor. He is set to speak in about an hour. What do you expect to hear from him?
He is going to say again that America is back. He is going to emphasize the climate change and the pandemic. He'll try to steer away from the confrontation with China, and we already saw that the Chinese are not buying it. He suggested a meeting with Xi Jinping. Xi Jinping turned him down. That was in the phone call a couple of days ago. And while we're talking about cooperation with China on climate change, the Special Envoy John Kerry, the former Secretary of State, tried to get the Chinese on board, and he was pushed back. He was rebuffed. Why? Because in the meantime, we're doing what very much looks like Cold War version 2.0 against China with this huge $50 billion nuclear submarine deal with Australia. And guess what? The nuclear submarines will be capable of launching Tomahawk missiles, cruise missiles, that may be armed with nuclear warheads. And these are most probably to deter the Chinese aggressive policies in Indo-Pacific.
So international relations going to be under the magnifying glass. Ariel, I also want to ask you about Afghanistan because you brought that up a little bit earlier. Do you think the president can regain any credibility on the world stage after the withdrawal?
The only test for our credibility vis-a-vis Afghanistan is whether we can prevent terrorist organizations to establish themselves there and conduct terrorist attacks against the US, against our allies in Europe, and other allies such as India. If we manage to do that, I would say at least partially that mission would be accomplished. If, on the other hand, as we know, Al-Qaeda is closely embedded and enmeshed with Afghanistan, if Al-Qaeda or ISIS, which is in a conflict with Afghanistan, continue to conduct terrorist operations, if they escalate, if jihadis from all over the world pour into Afghanistan under the Taliban and attack other targets, then it will be very, very challenging and difficult for us, for the Western Alliance, to claim any kind of credibility on Afghanistan issue.
Last question before we let you go. UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres told the AP that the US and China need to repair their completely dysfunctional relationship. What do you think this statement says about that relationship and the potential for the future?
Clearly, if the Secretary General of the UN is so worried as to make a public statement as opposed to personal contacts and entreaties with Biden and Xi, things are going in a wrong direction, and they clearly do. I would add that here, I would not put the blame on the US doorstep, but we see the crackdown in China that has economic implications. The meltdown in the markets we saw yesterday has everything to do with Chinese ill thought through economic policies, internal crackdown on dissent, the policy in Hong Kong, the policy against movie stars. This is all a signal of a very hardline China that we need to do something about.
Ariel, I'm so sorry. We're going to have to leave it there. But Ariel Cohen, Senior Fellow at Atlantic Council, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for watching. Please subscribe to get more content like this.